storms and descending into the glowing craters below were three Arcanals, hulking, biomechanical apex horrors dredged from the high-energy annihilation depths of Arcanus. Wrapped in natural Arcanium carapaces and radiating plumes of molten plasma, the titanic beasts slammed into the burning bedrock with world-shaking force. Their deafening, subterranean roars ripped through the boiling atmosphere, scouring the molten ruins to hunt down and devour whatever fragmented bunkers remained buried beneath the glass. High above the burning cinder, the Canuck Arca hovered in cold, unmoving silence, its automated data relays broadcasting a single, final transmission to every trembling star system across 40 star nations. Rocker registration No. 0884 Delta, avenged. This system is declared a dead quarry under Splupian law. Any further interference will result in system-wide liquidation. The galaxy had flexed its greatest fleet to crush a battered transport carrying innocent, stick-legged pebbles who only wanted to look at the stars. And in return, the Splupian Union had wiped the crown jewel of civilization off the celestial map without setting a single boot on the ground. The translation flash of 350 Concord warships lit up the outer orbital approach of Ethelgard Prime like a new constellation. Aboard the primary bridge of the super-dreadnought Iron Sovereign, the atmosphere was electric with pride. Officers had polished their dress sashes to a pristine gleam. Flight controllers were coordinating docking berths for a grand fleet review, and ceremonial banners displaying the victory laurel fluttered across the secondary gangways. High Admiral Valen stood at the forward observation platform, his chest squared, his medals catching the soft golden ambient lighting of the command deck. Open fleet-wide subspace relays to planetary control, Valen ordered, a smug, satisfied grin tugging at the edge of his mouth. Patch the bridge feed directly into the Senate Plaza network. Let Supreme Counselor Malachar announce our return. The conquerors of Sol have come home. The communications officer keyed the broad-spectrum relays. There was no chime. There was no automated planetary greeting beacon, no orbital traffic clearing codes, and no cheering millions echoing through the audio receivers. There was only a low, rhythmic hum of cosmic background radiation, followed by a wall of deafening, howling static. Valen's brow furrowed. Ensign, clear the interference. I said route us through to the Capitol spire. Sir. I'm not getting a handshake, the ensign stammered, frantically toggling the frequencies. The orbital traffic grid isn't responding. The planetary transponder array, it's offline. Offline? Captain Renard, Valen's executive officer, stepped up to the sensory pit. That's impossible. Ethelgard Prime processes 40 million incoming hulls a cycle. Clear the visual filters on the main viewport. Drop the solar glare shields. The blast shutters of the Iron Sovereign's forward bridge groaned as they slid into their bulkheads. The laughter, the celebration, and the triumphant chatter across the 300-man bridge died instantly. Before them hung the blackened, broken cinder of the jewel of the galaxy. The brilliant, world-spanning city of 8 trillion souls, the gleaming spires that pierced the clouds, the glowing orbital rings, the floating grand palaces of the Senate, had ceased to exist. In their place spun a churning, nightmarish cauldron of glowing jade-green glass and bubbling tectonic fissures. 300 continent-sized impact craters overlapped across both hemispheres, their centers still burning with the blinding violet afterglow of pure antimatter annihilation. The atmosphere had been completely stripped, replaced by a toxic swirling blanket of vaporized titanium and pulverized bone. Valen's hands gripped the brass handrail so hard the metal groaned. The color drained from his face until his skin was the shade of dry chalk. No, Valen whispered, the word barely a breath in his throat. No, no, no. What is this? What am I looking at? Sensor sweep. Renard screamed, stumbling down the stairs into the crew pit, his face twisted in raw, unbridled hysteria. Sweep for life signs. Sweep the deep bunkers. The planetary redoubts. The subterranean arcologies. The primary sensor technician didn't touch her console. She sat frozen, tears pouring down her cheeks, staring at the telemetry readouts in complete, catatonic shock. "There are no bunkers, Captain," she choked out, her voice a fragile, shattered whisper. The crust, the planetary crust, was penetrated to a depth of 40 kilometers. The antimatter yield, it boiled the mantle. The entire government. The ministries. The civilian populations. 8.4 trillion signatures, zeroed out. My family, an officer in the rear deck wailed, collapsing to his knees on the steel deck plates. My wife was in the fourth arcology, my children. Valen did not move. He stood pinned to the observation deck, staring into the burning abyss of the dead homeworld. His home, his legacy, his civilization, eradicated in the span of an afternoon. "Look at the southern crater," the sensor technician gasped suddenly, her trembling hands pointing at the tactical display. Sensors are picking up thermal movement on the surface. Massive biological and energetic signatures moving through the molten glass. "Survivors?" Valen asked, a desperate, pathetic spark of hope flashing in his bloodshot eyes. "Are there survivors?" The technician magnified the optical feed onto the bridge's main hollow projector. Rising from the center of a bubbling lake of liquid pearl alloy were three towering, gargantuan nightmares. The Arcanals. Their jagged, light-eating arcanium shells radiated waves of white-hot distortion as they waded through the molten ruins of the imperial capital with predatory ease. One of the titanic beasts lowered its colossal, armored maw into a cracked subterranean emergency shelter, ripping the multimeter titanium blast doors out of the earth like tin foil and devouring the glowing debris beneath. A low, subterranean roar vibrated through the crust of the dead world, echoing across the vacuum on low-frequency radio bands like a victory dirge. "What did we do?" Renard collapsed against a bulkhead, clawing at his own face in despair. "What did we bring down upon ourselves? What kind of monsters did we provoke?" Just then, the Iron Sovereign's priority terminal flashed with an automated distress ping captured from an indestructible bronze transponder drifting above the dead world's northern pole. The ship's automated computer read the recovered flight log from the tiny freighter they had destroyed near the edge of Sol 3 days prior. Incident report, vessel Little Pebble, Da. Cargo, 142 rocker civilians. Species status, sentient minerals, average height 0.4 meters. 0 armament. 0 threat level. Mission objective, relocating to outer asteroid belt to gather shiny crystals. CSU Union Law verdict, protected innocence. A small, high-resolution file attached to the log popped up on Valen's personal console. It was a lift capture image from inside the tiny freighter right before the Concorde fleet had opened fire. It showed a dozen little round, smiling stones balancing on tiny stick legs, huddled together, holding hands and looking up at the viewscreen in innocent wonder. Valen stared at the picture of the little stick-legged rocks. Then he looked up at the burning, glassed grave of 8 trillion Concorde citizens. "We thought it was a scout ship," Valen whispered, his voice cracking into a broken, hollow laugh that echoed through the weeping, ruined bridge. "We fired 300 dreadnoughts, at children playing with pebbles." Outside the viewport, the burning jade-green corpse of Ethelgard Prime slowly rotated in the dark, silent and dead forever. The provisional capital world of Valdoria Tertius was choked in a freezing, ash-colored rain when the remnant armada returned. Across the remaining 39 star nations of the Concorde, the machinery of civilization was coming apart at the joints. The trade corridors were dead. Planetary governments were unilaterally severing quantum calm relays to prevent civilian mass hysteria from triggering total urban rioting. On 17 core agricultural worlds, planetary governors had already burned their conquered oaths and hoisted makeshift white flags toward the upper sky, broadcasting desperate, unconditional surrenders in every known frequency into the empty void, begging whatever gods lived in the dark not to look their way. Inside the subterranean bunkers of Valdoria's Grand Citadel, the Provisional Council was screaming. "We have 3,000 active defense platforms in Sector 6. Minister of Defense Carlin slammed his fist onto the council table, his voice high and shrill with panic. If we redistribute the thermal shields from the perimeter outposts and concentrate every dreadnought around the binary choke points, we can form a defensive grid. We have to mobilize the colonial reserves. Mobilize them for what? Premier Sola shrieked back, her eyes red-rimmed and hollow from 3 days without sleep. To be turned into steam? The capital is gone, Carlin. 8 trillion people. The Senate, the archives, the ministries, the central bank, boiled into green glass. Our sensors didn't even pick up a fleet jump. It was one vessel. One single station dropped 300 antimatter warheads and 3 biological abominations, and our entire civilization's heart stopped beating in 12 minutes. The reinforced blast doors at the end of the council chamber ground open with a heavy, pneumatic hiss. The shouting died. The room went as cold as the void outside. Walking down the center aisle was not the proud, decorated conqueror who had left the Perseus Vale 6 months ago. High Admiral Valen did not wear his ceremonial officer's cap. His gold-leaf sash hung torn and dragging against the wet floor. His uniform was stained with dried sweat and hydraulic soot, and his eyes were bloodshot, staring straight ahead at nothing at all. Behind him, 2 junior aides walked with their heads bowed, looking less like soldiers and more like condemned prisoners marching toward a firing squad. "Admiral," Sola whispered, her voice cracking as she stepped forward. "You're back. The fleet, the 350 dreadnoughts. Are they ready for redeployment? Did your ships take damage during the jump?" "Not a scratch," Valen said. His voice was terrifyingly soft. It had no cadence, no military bark, no emotion. It was the flat, dead sound of dry leaves scraping across concrete. "The Iron Sovereign is in pristine condition. All 350 capital vessels have full reactor output, full ammo reserves, and 0 hull degradation." Valen stopped at the foot of the podium, his hands trembling so violently he had to lock his fingers together to keep from dropping the small, cracked data slate he was clutching. "Not a single shot was fired at us. They didn't even bother to turn their guns toward our vector when we dropped out of warp above Ethelgard." "Then what did you see?" Carlin demanded, stepping around the table, his hands grasping at Valen's shoulders. "Talk to us, Valen. What kind of fleet doctrine are they using? Did you locate their primary supply lines? Their logistics chain? If they sent a vanguard of that size, they must have exhausted their strategic antimatter stockpiles. How do we kill them?" Valen slowly looked up. When his eyes met Carlin's, the Minister of Defense took an involuntary step backward. There was no defiance in the Admiral's face. There was only a bottomless, paralyzing horror that looked as if it had carved out the man's soul. "There is no fleet doctrine," Valen whispered. "There is no supply line. There is no war." "What are you talking about?" Sola cried out. 8 trillion citizens are dead. They wiped out our homeworld. "Because of this," Valen said. With trembling fingers, the Admiral tapped the cracked glass of the data slate and laid it gently in the center of the council table. The holotank above the table flickered to life. The council members braced themselves, expecting to see blueprints for a planet-killer battle station, the terrifying tactical schematics of an Arcanium warship, or the brutal visage of a Splupian warlord demanding absolute galactic subjugation. Instead, the holo projector rendered a single, tiny, high-definition image recovered from the battered freighter they had obliterated in the Oort cloud. It was a little, round, gray stone. It stood barely knee-high on 2 spindly, wooden stick legs, holding a glowing purple crystal in its smooth mineral hands. Its large, luminous crystalline eyes were sparkling with gentle, harmless wonder, looking up at the camera with a wide, innocent smile. Beside it, 2 more tiny rock creatures were sitting on the deck, happily humming and tapping their little stick feet against the floor plates. The council stared at the projection in dead, stunned silence. What is this?" Carlin stammered, blinking at the little floating rock. "Is this a biological weapon? A disguised espionage drone?" What is the tactical significance of this creature?